Welcome to Trench Diaries. This is Stuka Pilot part 13. It is one of our last days at Farmos. A message has just been received that Ivan had infiltrated with a strong armored spearhead in the direction of the Matra mountains and has reached the outskirts of Goenjes. Our troops, which have been outflanked, are anxious whether it is possible to restore the situation and close the gap. The weather is bad, and we find this particularly trying because this part of the country is very hilly and the cloud cover is even lower than elsewhere. We leave Budapest to port and soon see the Matra mountains ahead and shortly afterwards the town of Goenjes. Fires are burning some miles to the south. It is apparent that something is going on there. Sure enough, tanks are traveling along the road, and they are certainly not German. As I make a wide sweep in that direction to obtain a general picture of the enemy's strength, I am met by intense light and medium flak fire. We circle round the advance guard at low level. Right out in front of the T-34s and Stalins is a type of tank I have never seen before, nor have I yet come across it as an American model. I deal with this stranger first and then turn my attention to the others. When 5 tanks are in flames, I have used up all my ammunition. The anti-tank flight has also done an excellent job, and it has been a bad morning for Ivan. We reform and head for home, being engaged for part of the way by Soviet Yak-9 fighters, which have appeared on the scene but do us no harm. We are within 10 minutes of our base and well behind our own lines when it suddenly strikes me. How am I to describe the first tank I shot up when making out my report? Will my automatic camera have taken a good enough photograph for me to be able to say for certain what type of tank it was? It is very important that the General Staff should be informed whether and what new types are appearing on any sector of the front. Such information is an indication that new weapons are being put into production or delivered from other countries. I must know what model that first tank was, so I tell the 3rd Squadron leader to take the formation home while I turn around and fly back to the tanks. I throttle back a little and circle 4 or 5 times at 12 to 15 feet in a narrow radius round the mysterious steel monster and give it a leisurely examination from the closest proximity. To one side of it stands a Stalin which has apparently just driven up from the rear of the party to see what has happened here. The strange tank is still burning. As I circle round it for the last time, I see some Ivans crouching under the projecting chain guard of the Stalin behind a 13mm AA machine gun mounted on a tripod. Squeezed close against the tank with their heads down, they look up at me and, seeing smoke come out of the muzzle of the machine gun, I perceive that they are busy firing at me. I am within about 50, at the very most 60 yards range, but the variations caused by the wide arc I am describing are too great for them to make sure of hitting me unless they are experienced gunners and have learned just the right thing to do. I am still speculating in this fashion when 2 hammer blows strike my aircraft and I feel a searing pain in my left thigh. I struggle hard to overcome the blackness in front of my eyes and become aware that a wet, warm flow of blood is running down my leg. Garderman sits behind me. I tell him, but he cannot do anything for me because it is impossible for him to get forward. I have no bandages with me. The country we are flying over is only thinly inhabited, the terrain not especially suitable for a forced landing. If we come down here, goodness knows how long it will take to get proper medical aid, and I shall bleed to death. So I must try to reach Budapest, which is 25 minutes away. I can see that my strength is failing fast. The blood is still flowing freely. I have a queer feeling in my head, a sort of trance, but I keep on flying and feel that I still have control of my senses. I switch on the intercom and ask Garderman. Do you think I will pass out suddenly, or will my strength go on ebbing gradually? Well, you'll never reach Budapest in all probability, but you won't faint suddenly. The last words are a quick addition, presumably so as not to upset me. Then I'll go on flying and chance it. The throttle is forward as far as it will go. Minutes of anxious tension pass. I won't give in, I won't. There's the fighter airfield. Budapest flaps down, throttle back. I'm down. It's all over. I come to on an operating table in a private hospital. The nurses gathered round me are watching me with a peculiar look on their faces. Behind the surgeon, Professor Fick, stands Gardermann. He's wagging his head. He tells me afterwards that while I was under the anesthetic, I had just said some very curious things which did not seem to have exactly delighted the nurses. What can one do in a situation like that? Professor Fick explained that he has extracted a 13mm machine gun bullet which had entered my leg at an angle, another having passed clean through the flesh. He tells me I have lost a great deal of blood and that as soon as he has set my leg in plaster, I must go into a nursing home on Lake Balaton to recuperate as quickly as possible under the best medical care and to give my wounds a chance to heal in peace and quiet. Fridolin has meanwhile arrived as well and curses me for having let my curiosity land me in this mess, but although he does not admit it, he is glad that it was no worse. He reports that we are to move back into the Stuhlweißenburg area. We ourselves will be at Burgond. Now they hoist me onto a Storch ambulance plane and fly me to Hevis on Lake Balaton, where I am admitted to Dr. Peters' sanatorium. I have already asked Professor Fick how long it will be before I am able to walk or at least fly. His answer was ambiguous, presumably because he had been tipped off by Gardermann, who has sufficient reason to know my impatient nature. I insist on Dr. Peter immediately taking off my bandage and telling me how long he thinks I shall have to remain here. He refuses to disturb the dressing. Then, after a good deal of argument, he examines the wound and says, "If there are no complications, you will be on your back for 6 weeks." Up till this moment I had not been depressed because of my wound, but now I feel that I am again out of everything, condemned to inactivity at a time when every able-bodied man is needed. I could play merry hell, I am so mad. That's a good one when my leg is in plaster and I can hardly move. But one thing I am sure of, I shall never stand it that long. No matter how good the nursing and the bodily rest may be for me, I shall never have any rest until I am back with the wing and able to fly with it. Fridolin comes over from Burgond and visits me every other day with a briefcase full of papers for me to sign and keeps me posted about the unit's operations, its worries and requirements. Between Farmhouse and our present airfield, the wing was temporarily stationed for a few days only on the aerodrome at Veces, a suburb of Budapest. Latterly bad November weather conditions have often prevailed and, despite the critical situation, only very few sorties could be carried out. On the 8th day he visits me again with the news that the Soviets are attacking Budapest with strong forces and have already established bridgeheads on this side of the Danube. Worse still, a fresh offensive from the south towards Lake Balaton is aimed at thrusting a wedge between our lines. He's not a little astonished when I tell him that I have had enough of lying in bed and am going to get up and drive back with him to the wing. But he does not finish his sentence. He knows my obstinacy. The sister hears Fridolin packing my things and cannot believe her eyes when she puts her head in at the door to see what is going on. By the time Dr. Peter has been fetched, he finds me ready to leave. I am well aware that he cannot accept the responsibility. I do not ask him to. He shakes his head as he watches the departure of our car, which will bring us to our station in an hour. We are billeted in the village as at Farmhouse. The people are more than friendly, which is only to be expected, seeing that they look to us to halt the Russians and to liberate their already partly occupied country. Dahlmann, my batman, has already prepared a heated room in a tiny cottage, doubtless believing that it will at first be needed as a sick room. A few days and then the spell of bad weather ends. From the first day I am back in harness after my plaster bandage has been given some extra support. Locomotion is not exactly easy, but I manage. In the middle of December, our airfield becomes more and more of a bog owing to heavy rain and snow, and we move again to Varpolata. This airfield is well situated on high ground and we are able to take off at any time. My third squadron is eventually to be re-equipped with Focke-Wulf 190s. In view of the situation, I should not like to have it withdrawn from operations for any time because of this change of aircraft. Therefore, 1 or 2 pilots in rotation are temporarily attached to the wing staff, and between sorties I introduce them to the new type and teach them how to handle it. Each of them flies a number of circuits, varying according to his airmanship, and then I take him with me as number 2 on operations. After 15 to 20 sorties, their initiation to the unfamiliar aircraft may be considered satisfactorily concluded, and other crews have their turn. In this way, the 3rd Squadron is able to remain in action without interruption. On their first operational flights, the crews generally have to learn the hard way, for the defense is everywhere strong, and besides, they are still a bit scared of the new type, especially as they have no rear gunner to ensure them against enemy fighter interference from behind. On his first sortie in a FW-190, Flight Officer Stähler is hit in the engine by flak, so that he has to come down at once. He succeeds in making a near-forced landing within our lines. Everything goes wrong on that day. I am just about to take off on a sortie with Flight Lieutenant M, who is also having a course of instruction with me, when a strong formation of IL-2s with fighter escort flies past on the horizon at 1,800 feet. It is a cold December day, and it would take me some time to warm up the engine so as to get it running properly, but meanwhile Ivan is sure to have disappeared. Then it occurs to me that during the last few really cold days, the mechanics have again been making use of the warming up apparatus, which enables us to take off at once without having to let the engine run for a longer time than it's usual. This apparatus depends on a special fuel preparation. I make a sign to M to waste no time in filling up and to take off with me. Our bomb load is under our aircraft for the mission which has been planned. I do not want to leave the bombs behind, for we have a mission to fulfill. Perhaps, even with this load, we can still overtake the IL-2 formation. M is apparently flying a slow aircraft and lags behind. I gradually gain on the Iron Gustavs, which cross their own lines when I am still 800 yards away. But I am pig-headed and determined to have a go at them, even though I am alone. With my FW-190, I am not afraid of the skill of the fighter pilots flying Lag 5s and Yak 9s. There is a sudden noise in my engine, a spurt of oil gums up everything so that I can no longer see out. In a twinkling, all the cockpit windows are opaque. In the first instant, I think that my engine has been hit by flak or a Russian fighter, but then I realize that it is a defect in the engine causing a piston seizure. The engine is puttering and rumbling horribly. It may cut out altogether at any moment. The second I hear the noise, I put my nose down by a kind of reflex action and headed for our own lines. Now I must be over them. To bail out is out of the question with my plaster splint, quite apart from the fact that I am flying much too low. This aircraft will never be able to climb another foot. I throw off the hood in order to at least be able to see out while I am flying at 150 feet. There is still no terrain below me suitable for a forced landing, besides which I am anxious to come as near as possible to the airfield so as not to lose time in getting back to my unit. A church steeple whizzes past me very close. Lucky it was not in my path. Obliquely ahead I see a road embankment, and any second now I can expect the propeller to stop. I can only hope the aircraft will clear the embankment. I pull the stick and wait. Will she make it or not? She makes it. Now I touch down on the ground. Skidding and crunching over the hard-frozen earth, the aircraft slides parallel with the broad ditch and comes to a standstill. Nothing has happened to my leg, my chief anxiety. I look out over a silent, peaceful winter landscape. Only the distant rumble of artillery reminds me that it is not yet peace, although Christmas is on the doorstep. I hoist myself out of my seat with a glance at the smoking engine and sit down on the fuselage. A car with 2 soldiers is coming along the road. They first look me over carefully to make sure I am not a Russian, for they come down more often than we do on our side of the line, and mostly shot down at that. The men lay a small plank across the ditch and carry me to their car. An hour later, I am back to the airfield and ready for another sortie. Our billets are in a barracks a few miles below the airfield on the outskirts at Wapalota. The next day, between sorties, I am lying on my bed for a little rest when I hear a roar of aircraft. Those are no German planes. At an angle through the open window, I catch sight of a Russian Boston formation flying at 1,200 feet. They are coming straight towards us. A second later, they are already upon us and the bombs are falling. Even with sound legs, I could not have been more quickly on the floor. A heavy bomb bursts 15 yards in front of my window and blows to bits my BMW car, which was waiting there for me. Dahlmann, who comes in at the door opposite the window at that very moment to warn me of the alert, suddenly finds the window frame round his neck. He gets off with a shock, but no further damage. Ever since, he has taken to crawling about with bent shoulders and a crab-apple face like a little old man. Evidently, he no longer thinks much of war, and we laugh every time we see this youngster in his new role. Presently, with our support from the air, there is a lull in the Lake Balaton area, but to the east, the Soviets have bypassed Budapest and reached the Gran River north of the Danube. South of Budapest, they have pushed out of their bridgeheads and, cooperating with forces thrusting northwest from the south, have gone over to the offensive. The spearheads of their advance are on the eastern edge of the Vecek Mountains north of Stuhlweißenburg, so that Budapest is encircled. Some of our sorties are flown in this area or even further eastward. We try to disrupt their communications far behind the front in the Hadvan area, where Soviet supply trains are already running. In this rush of events, we soon become maids of all work. We are dive bombers, attack planes, fighters, and reconnaissance aircraft. Chapter 16. Christmas, 1944. The battle for the relief of Budapest is in full swing. We are now stationed at Kememet St. Peter in the Papa area. We, the flying personnel, have just got in front the airfield at Varpalota, and before we have even had time to settle down, Fridolin pops his head in and asks, "Don't you chaps know it's only 2 days to Christmas?" He's right. According to the calendar, it must be so. Take off, sortie, land. Take off, sortie, land. That has been our rhythm, day in, day out, for years. Everything else is absorbed into this rhythm, cold and heat, winter and summer, weekdays and Sundays. Our lives are condensed into a few ideas and phrases which fill our minds and refuse to be dismissed, especially now that the war has indeed become a struggle for survival. One day follows another, the breath of today the same as that of yesterday. Sortie, where to, against whom, weather, flag. These words and thoughts preoccupy the very youngest pilots just as they do the wing commander. Will it go on like this forever, I wonder. So the day after tomorrow will be Christmas. Fridolin with one of the administrative staff drives over to group headquarters to fetch our Christmas mail. Meanwhile, greetings to the Immelmann circus come in even from army units. We return from our last sortie on Christmas Eve at 5 o'clock. The place looks really Christmassy, gay and festive, almost like home. As there is no large hall available, each flight has its own celebrations in the biggest room in their headquarters. I drop in on them all. Every unit observes the occasion in its own fashion, reflecting the personality of its skipper. It is jolly everywhere. I myself spent the greater part of Christmas Eve with the wing staff company. Here too the room is festively decorated with mistletoe and holly and cheerful in the light of many candles. 2 large Christmas trees with a table covered with presents set up in front of them remind us of our childhood. My soldiers' eyes are bright pools of nostalgic dreams. Their thoughts are with wife and child at home, with parents and families, in the past and in the future. Only subconsciously do we perceive among the green the German flag of war. It jerks us back to reality. We are celebrating Christmas in the field. We sing Stille Nacht, Heilige Nacht and all other Christmas songs. The raucous military voices blend in a softer euphony. Then the great miracle happens in our hearts. The thoughts of bombs and targets, shells and flag and death are softened by an extraordinary sense of peace, of serene and soothing peace. And we are able to think of sublime and beautiful things with the same ease as we think of walnuts, punch and Pfefferkuchen. The final echo of the lovely German Christmas carols has died away. I say a few words about our German Christmas. I want my men to see me today above all as their comrade, not their commanding officer. We sit together happily for another hour or two, and then Christmas Eve is over. St. Peter is kind to us on the first day of the holidays. There is a dense fog. From conversation over the telephone during Christmas, I know that Ivan is attacking and that we are urgently needed, but flying is absolutely impossible. The next morning I play a short game of ice hockey with my men, which this time means standing in goal in my fur boots, as with my 5-week-old wounds I can do no more than hobble clumsily about. Skating is out of the question. In the afternoon I am invited with a few colleagues by the people on which I am billeted to a shoot. I know very little about this common or garden shooting on terra firma. Our party consists of a large number of guns, but only a very few beaters. The hares know that the odds are on their side and invariably dart through the wide gaps in our pocket in the nick of time. Wading through the deep snow does not admit of any very rapid progress either. My driver, Böhme, is on my flank. All of a sudden, I see a magnificent specimen of hare break out of cover in his direction. Pointing my gun, I swivel round like a born hunter, close one eye, and bang, I pull the trigger. A body rolls over, not the hare, but Böhme, whom in my novice enthusiasm I have entirely overlooked. He is still mistrustful of my intentions, for he looks at me out of the snow with an expression of dismay and says reproachfully, "Really, sir?" He had noticed my aim in time and thrown himself flat in a flash. The buckshot missed him, but also the hare. Afterwards, I am more scared by what happened than either of them. That would have been a Christmas surprise indeed. Another confirmation of the truth of our old Stuka maxim, nothing comes off except what you have practiced. The following morning we have at last good flying weather. Ivan is early abroad, he raids our airfield. Again, their bombing is pitifully bad, it is a disgrace. Their low-level attacks stop at 1,200 feet, we suffer practically no damage at all. We are out the whole of the second holiday to relieve the ground forces up in the northeast on the River Gran and on the rest of the Budapest front. Our peaceful Christmas mood has been dispelled. The rigors of war envelop us again, the quiet cheerfulness of the peace of Christmas Eve has passed into the limbo of yesterday. Fierce battles are raging in the air and on the ground. On our side, fresh reinforcements have been thrown in, all old acquaintances of mine, friends from the Eastern Front, tankmen who, like ourselves, are the High Command's fire brigade. Their tasks and ours will be to punch a way out for those parts of our divisions which are trapped in Budapest, to open a lane for them to rejoin the rest of the army. Together, we should be able to pull the chestnuts out of the fire. Year in, year out, almost day by day, I have fought in every sector on the Eastern Front. I fancy that I have gained a fair knowledge of military tactics. Experience teaches that practice makes perfect. Practical knowledge is the sole criterion of what is possible or impossible, good or bad. Through our daily flying, we have learned to know every ditch, every stretch of country thoroughly. We are constantly low above them. It is quite impossible to approve of the conduct of the battle here. Some of the armored units have been broken up, and the grenadiers which are part of them are being thrown in separately. The tanks, who've always worked with them as a team, feel at sea and uncertain of themselves. Without them, the troops which have been assigned to them have no practical experience of cooperating with tanks, and this may result in dangerous surprises. I fail to understand how such an order can have been given. Moreover, one could hardly imagine a worse choice than the sector selected for the offensive because of marshes and other difficulties of terrain, when there are so many other favorable alternatives. The infantry, on the other hand, have to advance across flat, open country, which is ideal for tanks, but no place for infantry. The enemy takes full advantage of all this, and so our infantry is opposed to the Soviet steel monsters without tank support. Why these unnecessary losses? This is courting failure. Who issues these orders? We sit together the entire evening, brooding over these questions. On December the 30th, a wireless signal is received ordering me to come to Berlin immediately and to report to the Reichsmarschall. I fume because I feel that now especially my presence here is indispensable during these difficult operations. I take off for Berlin the same day, going via Vienna and determined to be back with my comrades in 2 or 3 days. Orders are orders. The only luggage I take with me is a large dispatch case with a change of linen and toilet articles. In view of the seriousness of the situation at the front, I dismiss the possibility of being kept in Berlin for longer. On the way, I already have an uncomfortable hunch that I have not been sent for anything pleasant. When I was wounded the last time in November, I received another order grounding me, in spite of which I went up again as soon as I got out of hospital. Up till now, no one has taken the matter up, and I had gradually interpreted this silence as tacit acquiescence, but now I guess the question has come to a head, and I am going to be put on the mat. I am flying to Berlin very reluctantly, knowing as I do that I shall never obey this order. I cannot bear to be merely looking on, giving advice or issuing orders at a time when my country is in direct need, especially as my wide practical experience gives me an advantage over others who lack this training. Success is the fruit of experience and commensurate with it. In spite of having been wounded 5 times, some of them seriously, I have always had the luck to make a quick recovery and to be able soon afterwards to pilot my aircraft again day after day, year in, year out, up and down the Eastern Front, from the White Sea to south of Moscow, from near Astrakhan to the Caucasus. I know the Russian front inside out. Therefore, I feel an unremitting obligation to go on flying and fighting until the guns are silent and our country's liberty is assured. Physically, I can do this because I have a healthy constitution and a body trained by sport. My fitness is one of the most valuable sources of my strength. After a short stay with friends in Vienna, I land in Berlin 3 hours later and immediately report by telephone to Karin Hall. I would prefer to drive straight out there so as to be able to fly back without any loss of time. To my bewilderment, I am told to remain at the Fürstenhof and to apply in the morning at the Air Ministry for a pass to travel on the Reichsmarschall's special train, which is leaving for the west. My trip is going to be longer than I expected, so much is clear. It does not seem to have anything to do with a reprimand. We leave for the west the following evening from Grünewald station. This means I shall see the new year coming on board the train. I dare not let my thoughts dwell on my unit. If I do, I shall see red. What does the year 1945 hold in store for us? We are in the Frankfurt area early on January the 1st. I hear the roar of aircraft and look out into the graying morning. An armada of fighter planes flying low roars past the carriage window. My first thought is Americans. It is an age since I have seen so many of our aircraft in the sky at the same time, but this is unbelievable. They are all marked with the German swastika and are Me-109s and FW-190s. They are heading westward. Later, I am to learn the nature of their mission. Now the train pulls up. It seems we are somewhere near Nauheim-Friedberg. I am met by a car and driven through a tract of forest to a building which resembles an ancient castle. Here I am greeted by the Reichsmarschall's adjutant. He tells me that the chief has not arrived yet. I shall have to wait. He doesn't know what I am here for. I have no choice but to kick my heels here at the Western General HQ. I go for a walk for a couple of hours. What wonderful air in these German woods and hills. I fill my lungs with relish. Why have I been ordered here? I've been instructed to be back at 3 o'clock, at which time the Reichsmarschall is expected. I hope I shall not be kept waiting before he receives me. He's not there when I return. Besides myself, a general has arrived, an old friend of mine from my Stuka training days at Graz. He tells me about today's operations, for the planning and conduct of which he is very largely responsible. Reports continually come in of large-scale attacks on airfields in Belgium and northern France. The aircraft you saw this morning were part of one of the formations we have sent out to make low-level attacks on the Allied air bases. We hope to be able to destroy so many aircraft that the enemy's air superiority above their offensive, which has been halted in the Ardennes, will be neutralized. I tell the general that such a thing would be impossible on the Eastern Front because the distances which would have to be flown over enemy territory are too great, and to fly at low level is merely inviting heavy losses from the very strong ground defense. Could it be different in the West? It seems improbable. If the Americans are successful with similar attacks over Germany, this is only because we have not sufficient protection for our airfields and their approaches, for the simple reason that we cannot divert enough men and material for this purpose. He tells me that today all formations have clearly mapped low-level approach routes. In the East, we have long since ceased to develop practice from theory. We do just the opposite. One can do no more than give the formation leader his assignment. How he performs it is his affair, for it is he who has to carry it out. At the present time, the war in the air has become so variable that one can no longer rely on theories. Only formation leaders have the necessary experience at the critical moment and are likely to make the proper decision. It is a good thing we realized this in the East in time, otherwise it is a sure thing that none of us would be flying anymore. Besides, have they not yet grasped the fact that we are helpless against the enemy's masses of men and material? For the enemy, 500 aircraft more or less on the ground is not decisive as long as their crews remain in action. It would be infinitely better to use the fighters which have been saved up for so long over our own front to clear the airspace above it. If we could remove for a while the nightmare of the Allies' immense air superiority, we could give our comrades on the ground a chance to get their second wind. And movements of troops and supplies behind the lines could be carried out unmolested. Any enemy aircraft we might destroy would in most cases be a genuine loss because the crews would be lost with them. All these reflections passed through my mind. A few hours later, the final result of the operation confirms my misgivings. 500 Allied aircraft have been destroyed on the ground, over 220 of ours with their crews have failed to return. Among those lost today are veteran formation leaders, old-timers, of which so few are left. It saddens me. Tonight the operation will be reported to the Reichsmarschall and to the Supreme Commander as a great victory. Is this intentional deception or exaggerated personal ambition? I don't know. The adjutant comes in and says to me, "Wing Commander von Below has just rung up. He would like you to go over for a cup of coffee." But can I not report direct to the Reichsmarschall? The Reichsmarschall is not here yet, and there is no reason why you should not pay this short visit to Wing Commander von Below. I consider whether I ought to change, but decide against it because I would like to keep my last clean shirt for my interview with the Reichsmarschall. A fairly long drive through the forest brings us into a town of huts and chalets, the Führer's Western HQ. Over coffee I tell Wing Commander von Below about the latest happenings on the Russian front. After 20 minutes he leaves me, comes back at once, and briefly asks me to follow him. Quite unsuspectingly, I follow him through several rooms, and then he opens the door, stands aside for me to pass, and I am face to face with the Führer. All I can think of is that I have not put on a clean shirt, otherwise my mind is a blank. I recognize the other person standing round him, the Reichsmarschall, beaming, very unusual of late, Admiral Dönitz, Field Marshal Keitel, the Chief of the General Staff, Lieutenant General Jodl, and a number of other military notabilities, including generals from the Eastern Front. They are all grouped round an enormous table spread with a map showing the present situation in the field. They look at me, and this scrutiny makes me nervous. The Führer has noticed my embarrassment and regards me for a while in silence. Then he offers me his hand and praises my last operation. He says that in recognition of it, he is awarding me the highest decoration for bravery, the golden oak leaves with swords and diamonds to the Knight's Cross of the Iron Cross, and is promoting me to the rank of group captain. I have been listening to his words in a semi-daze, but when he says with marked emphasis, "Now you have done enough flying, your life must be preserved for the sake of our German youth and your experience," I am on the alert in a twinkling. This means I am to be grounded. Goodbye to my comrades. My Führer, I cannot accept decoration and promotion if I am not allowed to go on flying with my wing. My right hand is still clasped in his, he is still looking me in the eyes. With his left hand, he gives me a black, velvet-lined case containing the new decoration. The many lights in the room make the diamonds sparkle in a blaze of prismatic colors. He looks at me very gravely, then his expression changes, and he says, "All right, you may go on flying." He smiles. At this, a warm wave of joy wells up in my heart, and I am happy. Afterwards, von Below tells me that he and the generals nearly had a stroke when I made my proviso. He assures me that the sheet lightning in the Führer's face does not always resolve into a smile. Everyone offers his congratulations, the commander-in-chief of the Luftwaffe with especial cordiality. He gives me a hefty pinch in the arm from sheer delight. Admiral Dönitz's congratulations are rather qualified, for he adds a trifle snappishly, "I consider your persuading the Führer to allow you to go on flying unsoldierly. I have also had good U-boat captains, but sooner or later they have had to give up. It is a good thing he is not my commander-in-chief." The Führer takes me over to the map table and tells me that the conference they've just had concerned the situation at Budapest. I have come from that sector, have I not? He recapitulates the reasons given him for the not exactly satisfactory operation now in progress in the Budapest area, which has so far failed to effect a link-up with the encircled city. I gather that weather, transport and other difficulties have been offered as an excuse, but no mention has been made of the blunders which we see every day on our sorties. The splitting up of the armored divisions and the choice of unsuitable terrain for both the tank and infantry assaults. I express my opinion based on long experience of the Eastern Front and the fact that during this engagement I have flown as much as 8 hours daily over the sector, mostly at low altitudes. They all listen to me in silence. After a short pause, the Führer remarks with a glance at the circle of his advisors, "You see, this is how I have been misled. Who knows for how long?" He reproaches nobody, although he knows the true circumstances, but it is evident that he resents the deception practiced on him. With reference to the map, he shows his willingness to regroup our forces for a fresh attempt to relieve Budapest. He asks me where I think would be the most favorable terrain for the armored units to attack. I give my opinion. Later, this operation is successful and the assault group reaches the outposts of the defenders of Budapest, who are able to break out. When the conference is ended, he takes me into his private study in an adjoining room, furnished in good taste and with utilitarian simplicity. I wished my comrades could be there and live through these hours with me, for it is because of their achievement that I am here. The Führer gives me a drink and we talk of many things. He asks after my wife, our boy, my parents and my sisters. Having made the most detailed enquiries about my personal affairs, he begins to speak of his ideas of rearmament. Not unnaturally, he starts with the Luftwaffe, dwelling particularly on the proposed modifications of the aircraft we are using. He asks me if I still think it practicable to continue flying with the slow Ju-87 now that the enemy's fighters are as much as 250 miles per hour faster than they are. Referring to some blueprints and calculations, he points out to me that a retractable undercarriage might increase the speed of the Ju-87 by 37 miles per hour at the very most. On the other hand, its diving performance would be disadvantageously affected. He solicits my opinion on every point. He discusses the minutest details in the field of ballistics, physics and chemistry with an ease which impresses me, who, without a doubt, is a critical observer in this department. He also tells me of his wish to have experiments carried out to test the feasibility of installing 4 30mm cannon in the wings instead of the present 2 37mm cannon. He thinks that the aerodynamic qualities of our anti-tank aircraft would be very greatly improved by this change. The ammunition would have the same tungsten core, with the result that the total effectiveness of the aircraft as a weapon would certainly be enhanced. After explaining to me far-reaching improvements in other departments, such as artillery, infantry weapons and U-boats, all with the same astonishing knowledge, he tells me that he has personally drafted the wording of the citation for my latest decoration. We've probably been chatting for an hour and a half when an orderly reports that the film is ready for showing. Every new weekly newsreel is immediately shown to him and given his sanction for release. It so happens, we have gone down only one flight of stairs and are seated in the film theater, that the first pictures actually show a scene taken at my dispersal at Stuhlweißenburg, followed by our Stukas taking off and ending with a picture of tanks being shot up by me in the area west of Budapest. After the film has been shown, I take my leave of the Supreme Commander. Wing Commander von Belo hands me the citation for the Knight's Cross, the oak leaves, the swords and the diamonds which have lain in the Reichschancellery. Each of them weighs several pounds, especially the last two, which are framed in gold and, apart from their great sentimental value, must be worth quite a lot. I drive to Göring's HQ. The Reichsmarschall expresses his pleasure, which is all the greater because recent events have made his position very difficult. The enemy's air superiority has aggravated almost all our troubles and even made things impossible, but who could prevent it? He is overjoyed and proud that at this moment one of his men should have been instrumental in making the Führer create a new German decoration for bravery. Drawing me a little aside, he says to me roguishly, "You see how envious the others are of me and the awkwardness of my position? At a conference, the Führer said that he was creating a new and unique decoration for you because your achievement is unique. Whereupon, the representatives of the other services objected that the recipient is a soldier of the Luftwaffe, whose problems are the cause of so many headaches. They wanted to know whether it was not at least theoretically possible for a soldier belonging to one of the other services to earn this distinction. So, you see what I'm up against. He goes on to say that he would never have believed I could induce the Führer to change his mind about letting me go on flying. Now that I have his authorization, he could not himself renew his prohibition. He begs me, as he has done repeatedly before, to accept the appointment offered me to command the attack units. But seeing that I have got around the Führer, I do not think he seriously believes he will win me over today. In the late afternoon, I am on board the special train for Berlin, where my aircraft is waiting to carry me back to my comrades at the front. I am in Berlin for only a few hours, but that is long enough to attract a whole mob of gold oak leaves rubbernecks, as the story has already been given out in the press and on the radio. In the evening, I meet Ritter von Halt, at this time leader of German sport. He tells me that after prolonged endeavor, he has succeeded in convincing Hitler that I ought to assume the leadership of the Reichssport movement at the end of the war. When my war experiences have been written and I have initiated my successor in my present field of activity, I am to be offered the post. I fly back by way of Görlitz, stopping to see my family and taking off again for Budapest on the same day, as reports from this sector on the front are very grave. The wing has been paraded when I land, so that the senior squadron leader may congratulate me in the name of the unit on my new honor and promotion. Then into the air again on a sortie in the Budapest area. If the Russian flag only knew how much gold and diamonds was flying overhead, said one of the ground staff with a grin, you can bet they would shoot better and exert themselves even more. Some days later, I receive a message from the Hungarian leader Szalasi inviting me to his HQ south of Sopron. General Fütterer, commanding the Hungarian Air Force, and Fridolin accompany me. In recognition of our operations against Bolshevism in Hungary, he invests me with the highest Hungarian military decoration, the Medal for Bravery. This has hitherto been awarded to only 7 Hungarians. I am the 8th to receive it and the only foreigner. The grant of an estate which goes with the award does not interest me much. It is to be presented after the war, and doubtless it will become a holiday resort for my unit. A bit of repetition in this episode. Our man is wounded again, he meets the Führer again, and this time to receive the highest grade of the Knight's Cross, with golden oak leaves, swords and diamonds. The story of this award in itself is quite interesting. A total of 12 sets were intended to be awarded, but only 6 sets were made for this grade of the Knight's Cross, and only 1 was actually awarded during the war, to Rudel. This makes Rudel the only soldier of the Wehrmacht to receive this specific award, and in turn makes him the highest decorated soldier of the German armed forces in World War II. It was presented in 2 versions, one to wear with sapphires instead of diamonds and 14-karat gold oak leaves, and one special occasion version with 58 real diamonds and 18-karat gold oak leaves. Rudel's set is still in his family's possession. The remaining 5 sets were taken by the US Army. And finally, as it turns out, Rudel was trigger happy even on the ground, as he is happily telling us about the hunting incident where he negligently discharges his shotgun and almost shoots one of his comrades. But it weighed heavily on his mind, so I'm sure he learned something from the event. Now, we are nearing the end of the book, and let's see what 1945 will bring for the Luftwaffe. See you next episode. Cheers.